Hi guys, welcome to Beacon Encourage this week, and our topic today will be Phase 10. I hope you guys enjoy it. And like they say on YouTube,
Welcome to our channel. As you have heard, the topic of today is Phase 10. Phase 10 is a card game that we play, especially if you come from Kasarani or adjacent area. I know should be very familiar with it. So Phase 10 is a card game that we play to connect, especially during this season. We actually go somewhere and make connections. Yes. So the purpose of a card game at the end of the day is to win. That's why you play that game, so that you win at the end of the day. So I have to ask two questions. Number one, what happens when you're dealt a bad hand? And number two, what happens when you meet adversaries? And to take the analogy of the card game, assuming the deck has been split and you have been given a deck of very bad cards, what happens? Or the players that you're playing with, they are very, very good players. So what happens in that scenario? We'll use that analogy to analyze and to discuss the life of King David. If you have been following Beacon Encourage, you should have seen Pastor Evans preaching on this guy called Joseph. And you saw the way, and it really described well the way Joseph life turned out. King David also followed the same, you can say that he followed the same script, where he was anointed, went through issues, and then finally he was anointed king. For our word for today, we'll be reading from 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 1 to 13.
1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 1 to 13. Now the Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I am sending you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided myself a king among his sons." And Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears it, he will kill me." But the Lord said, "Take a heifer with you, and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Then invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do. You shall anoint for me the one I name to you." So Samuel did what the Lord said and went to Bethlehem. And the elders of the town trembled at his coming and said, "Do you come peaceably?" And he said, "Peaceably, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." And then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. So it was when they came, and he looked at Eliab and said, "Surely the Lord's anointed is before him." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look at his appearance or at his physical stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord does not see as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." So Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel, and said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." Then Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." Thus Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. And Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord has not chosen this." And Samuel said to Jesse, "Are all the young men here?" And he said, "There remains yet the youngest, and there he is keeping the sheep." And Samuel said to Jesse, "Send and bring him, for we will not sit down till he comes here." So he sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy, with bright eyes and good looking. And the Lord said, "Arise, anoint him, for this is the one." Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel arose and went to Ramah.
1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 1 to 13 describes the anointing of David. It was a very interesting verse to read, because the criteria that Samuel used to anoint David was not God's criteria. David himself was not even present in his father's household when Samuel had come in. Actually, David was the last born of the brothers, so he was out there tending to the sheep, doing what is called low level menial work. David didn't choose to be anointed king of Israel. God chose David to anoint him king. So David himself was in when we are doing filmmaking, David could be called a passive main character, where he is just chosen to push the story. The story is not his, but he's chosen to participate in the story. Yeah, so it was interesting to know that David didn't choose; he was chosen, and more so, he was chosen from his place of current profession, which at the time was tending to his father's sheep. Yes. So when you go on and read about David's story, in chapter 17, David now moves into or is invited into Saul's castle, where he goes and he plays the lyre for King Saul, because Saul kept being distressed. So David went to play musical instruments. By the time it comes to verse 18, David in verse 17, David has dealt with Goliath. And when he moves on to verse 18, David is captain over the armies of Israel. And in verse 18, it's noted that David acted wisely in everything that he did. So much so that the women sang the famous song of Saul killed 1,000, David killed 10,000. And in verse 18 is when we see that Saul started having what is called an evil eye on David. We'll read 1 Samuel chapter 18, verses 6, verses 9, and verses 29.
1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 6. Now it had happened as they were coming home, when David was returning from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women had come out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing, to meet King Saul with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments. So the women sang as they danced and said, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Verse 9, it says, So Saul eyed David from that day forward. Verse 29 says, And Saul was still more afraid of David, so Saul became David's enemy continually.
So, as of verse 18, we can see that David's life has moved from being anointed, being blessed, having a bright future ahead of him, to a case where he doesn't know what is happening, where the boss, the king of that day, basically is looking for a way to kill him. So it's just like in life, where one moment you're very sure about something, and the next moment you don't know what's happening. It's just like what has happened in this season of Corona. When we go to 1 Samuel verse 21, from verse 10 to verse 13, we see that this is where David now has properly ran away from the king's castle, and he is now on the run, and a bounty has been put on his head. Yes, so taking the analogy of that card game which I had mentioned earlier, phase 10, sometimes you are dealt, bad cards, you are dealt with a bad deck. Things start happening in your life and you don't know what to do. We can take that comparison to David's life. What did he do during that time? What did he do from chapter 18 all the way to 2 Samuel? We can see that David kept the proper attitude. He kept his belief and his hope on God, and he believed that the word that was spoken by God to his life will come to pass. So the other question was, what happens when you meet strong adversaries? So when you look at the life of David had, quite a few adversaries during his lifetime. The most famous is Goliath of Gath, but also one of his consistent adversaries from the verses we have met was King Saul. But through it all, David kept a positive attitude, David kept his hope, and David kept his heart in God. So I'd like to encourage you that as we are going through this unsure season, as we are going through this, things are just happening. One moment you're very sure of what is happening. The other moment, everything has literally gone, not gone your way. I would like to encourage us to keep on keeping on, to keep strong with the Lord, to keep being encouraged, and to know that other people have gone through it before, and we can also make it through. When you read 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 15, you'll see that despite him being in the king's castle, he used to go home and tend his father's sheep, which was very odd because, uh, once we are elevated, most likely we forget where we came from. But according to that verse, David used to go back and tend his father's sheep. When you read 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 2, Saul insists that David come and moves away from his father's house and goes to the castle. But despite this, David kept the right attitude, and he kept the right, he kept his focus. He knew where he was going, and he knew that um, he had to depend on God for him to get to where he was going. So that's our word for this week. Thank you for joining us. Back to the studio.
Thank you, David, for that uh, good word and encouragement. And like he has said, and something that has really popped up several times, especially when David was handling Saul, was that he did it so wisely. He did it so wisely. And during this particular time of uncertainty and not being sure about what's going on, what's the next move, and you feel confused, I have a few words that I can share with you. And Psalms 143, verse 8. Let the morning bring me word of your unfailing love, for I have put my trust in you. Show me the way I should go, for to you I entrust my life. Let's not be worried, let's not be overwhelmed, and let's let the Spirit of the Lord lead us. One thing I've also come to realize is sometimes we tend to feel confused. You have, if you're a planner like me, you tend to plan for so many things. You have a PDF, you have a vision board, you have everything set out for you, everything is planned until Corona decides to pop in. And now you have to make do with what you have. And there's a word that says, consider it pure joy. That's James chapter 1, verse 2 to 5. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you shall ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Just imagine. Just imagine you had your whole plan, all of it there, but then now something happens, you're confused, you're uncertain, and then the Lord comes again and tells you in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. Now you see why we're going back to the whole point of you being confused and being overwhelmed? Yeah, you see it? Exactly. And that's why the word also says in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 33, for God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as it's in all churches of the saints. Now tell me, why would you worry? I hope you enjoyed and you feel encouraged. And don't let the Rona bring you down. And have a blessed week. Please don't forget to like, subscribe. However, as we leave, I'd like to leave you with some homework. What was Saul's favorite weapon? That's your homework. What was Saul's favorite weapon? Your answers eagerly awaited in the comment section. I will respond to all of them.